Right, I think I'm back. Am I back? Please say I'm back. Right. I think I am back now. Okay, cool. How are you guys doing today? Sorry about that. I'm having such trouble connecting. I will be contacting my internet provider on Monday when it opens up. So to sort this out because this is getting ridiculous. I'm paying PayPal, not PayPal. God, PlusNet, get there in the end, and they're not doing their job properly. So I need to give them a call. It's been going like this for months, and I've given them so many calls. Anyway, we're going to carry on from where we left off, guys. Right, before the stream ended a few seconds ago. Hopefully you will enjoy. Out. Make sure it's all working on over here. I think it is by the looks of it. Okay, cool. Right. Without further ado, we will carry on. We'll carry on from where I assume the stream ended. Right. Harry pressed on through the crowd until he found an empty compartment near the end of the train. He put Hagrid inside first, and then started to shove and heave his trunk towards the train door. He tried to lift it up the steps, but could hardly raise one end, and twice he dropped it painfully on his foot. "Want a hand?" It was one of the redhead twins he followed through the ticket box. "Yes, please," Harry panted. "Oi, Fred! Come here and help!" With the twins' help, Harry's trunk was at last tucked away in a corner of the compartment. "Thanks," said Harry, pushing his sweaty hair out of his eyes. "What's that?" said one of the twins, suddenly pointing at Harry's lightning scar. "Blimey," said the other twin. "Are you?" "He is," said the first twin. "Aren't you?" he added to Harry. "What?" said Harry. "Harry Potter," chorused the twins. "Oh, him," said Harry. "I mean, yes, I am." The two boys gawped at him, and Harry felt himself going red. Then, to his relief, a voice came floating in through the train's open door. "Fred! George! Are you there?" "Coming, Mum!" With a last look at Harry, the twins hopped off the train. Harry sat down next to the window where, half hidden, he could watch the red-headed family on the platform and hear what they were saying. The mother had just taken out her handkerchief. "One, you got something on your nose." The youngest brother tried to jerk out the way, but she grabbed him and began rubbing the end of his nose. "Mom, get off!" He wriggled free. "Oh, it's Ickle Ronnie got something on his nosy," said one of the twins. "Shut up," said Ron. "Where's Percy?" said their mother. "He's coming now." The oldest brother came striding into sight. He already changed into his billowing black Hogwarts robes, and Harry noticed a shiny red and gold badge on his chest with the letter P on it. "Can't stay long, Mother," he said. "I'm up front. The prefects have got 2 compartments to themselves." "Oh, are you a prefect, Percy?" said one of the twins with an air of great surprise. "You should have said something. We had no idea." "Hang on. I think I remember him saying something about it," said the other twin. "Once or twice a minute all summer." "Oh, shut up," said Percy, the prefect. "How come Percy got new robes anyway?" said one of the twins. "Because he's a prefect," said their mother fondly. "All right, dear. Well, have a good term. Send me an owl when you get there." She kissed Percy on the cheek, and he left. Then she turned to the twins. "Now, you two, this year you behave yourselves. If I get one more owl telling me you've blown up a toilet or blown up a toilet, we've never blown up a toilet." "Great idea, though. Thanks, Mum." "It's not funny. And look after Ron." "Don't worry, Ickle Wannykins is safe with us." "Shut up," said Ron again. It was almost as tall as the twins already, and his nose was still pink where his mother had rubbed it. "Hey, Mum, guess what? Yes, we just met on the train." Harry leant back quickly as they couldn't see him looking. You know that black-haired boy who was near us in the station? Know who he is? Who? Harry Potter! Harry heard the little girl's voice. Oh, Mum! Can I go on the train and see him, Mum? Oh, please! You've already seen him, Ginny, and the poor boy isn't something you goggle at in the zoo. Is he really, Fred? How do you know? I asked him. Saw his scar. It's really there, like lightning. Poor dear. No wonder he was alone. I wondered. It was ever so polite when he asked how to get on the platform. Never mind that. Do you think he remembers what you know who looks like? Their mother suddenly became very stern. I forbid you to ask him, Fred. No, don't you dare! And so he needs reminding of that on his first day at school. All right, keep your hair on. A whistle sounded. Hurry up, the mother said, and the three boys clambered onto the train. They leant out of the window for her to kiss them goodbye, and then their younger sister began to cry. Don't, Ginny. We'll send you loads of owls. We'll send you a Hogwarts toilet seat. George! Only joking, Mum. The train began to move. Harry saw the boy's mother waving and their sister, half laughing, half crying, running to keep up with the train until it gathered too much speed. Then she fell back and waved. Harry watched the girl and her mother disappear as the train rounded the corner. Houses flashed past the window. Harry felt a great leap of excitement. He didn't know what he was going to, but it had to be better than what he was leaving behind. The door of the compartment slid open, and the youngest red-headed boy came in. Anyone sitting there? He asked, pointing at the seat opposite Harry. Everywhere else is full. Harry shook his head, and the boy sat down. He glanced at Harry, and then looked quickly out the window, pretending he hadn't looked. Thought the froze there. Harry saw he still had a black mark on his nose. Hey, you're on! The twins were back. Listen, we're going down the middle of the train. Lee Jordan's got a giant tarantula down there. Right, mumbled Ron. Harry, said the other twin, did we introduce ourselves? Fred and George Weasley, and this is Ron, our brother. See you later then. Bye, said Harry and Ron. The twins slid the compartment door shut behind them. Are you really Harry Potter? Ron blurted out. Harry nodded. Oh, well, I thought it might be one of Fred and George's jokes, said Ron. And have you really got, you know? He pointed at Harry's forehead. Harry pulled back his fringe to show the lightning scar. Ron stared. So that's where you know who... Yes, said Harry. But I can't remember it. Nothing, said Ron eagerly. Well, I remember a lot of green light, but nothing else. Wow, said Ron. He sat and stared at Harry for a few moments. Then, as though he had suddenly realised what he was doing, he looked quickly out of his window again. Are all your family wizards? Asked Harry, who found Ron just as interesting as Ron found him. Yeah, I think so. I think Mum's got a second cousin who's an accountant, but we never talk about him. So you must know loads of magic already. The Weasleys were clearly one of those old wizarding families the pale boy in Diagon Alley had talked about. I heard you went to live with Muggles, said Ron. What are they like? Horrible. Well, not all of them. My aunt and uncle and cousin are, though. Wish I had 3 wizard brothers. 5, said Ron. For some reason, he was looking gloomy. I'm the 6th in our family to go to Hogwarts. You could say I've got a lot to live up to. Bill and Charlie have already left. Bill was head boy and Charlie was captain of Quidditch. Now Percy's a prefect. Fred and George mess around a lot, but they still get really good marks, and everyone thinks they're really funny. Everyone expects me to do as well as the others, but if I do, it's no big deal because they did it first. You never get anything new either with 5 brothers. I've got Bill's old robe, Charlie's old one, and Percy's old rat. Ron reached inside his jacket and pulled out a fat grey rat, which was asleep. His name's Scabbers, and he's useless. He hardly ever wakes up. Percy got an owl from my dad for being made a prefect, and they couldn't... I got Scabbers instead. Ron's ears went pink. He seemed to think he said too much, because he went back to staring out of the window. Harry didn't think there was anything wrong with not being able to afford an owl. After all, he had never had any money in his life until a month ago, and he told Ron so. All about having to wear Dudley's old clothes and never getting proper birthday presents. This seemed to cheer Ron up a bit. Until Hagrid told me, I didn't know anything about being a wizard or about my parents or Voldemort. Ron gasped. What? Said Harry. You said you know whose name? Said Ron, sounding both shocked and impressed. I had thought you, of all people. I'm not trying to be brave or anything, saying the name, said Harry. I just never knew you shouldn't. See what I mean? I've got loads to learn. I bet, he added, voicing for the first time something that had been worrying him a lot lately. I bet I'm the worst in the class. You won't be. There's loads of people who come from Muggle families, and they learn quick enough. While they had been talking, the train had carried them out of London. Now they're speeding past fields full of cows and sheep. They were quiet for a time, watching the fields and lanes flick past. Around 12:30, there was a great clattering outside in the corridor, and a smiling, dimpled woman slid back the door and said, "Anything off the trolley, dears?" Harry, who had had breakfast, leapt to his feet, but Ron's ears went pink again and muttered that he had brought sandwiches. Harry went out into the corridor. He had never had any money for sweets with the Dursleys, and now that he had pockets rattling with gold and silver, he was ready to buy as many Mars bars as he could carry. But the woman didn't have Mars bars. What she did have were Bertie Bott's every flavour beans, Dooble's best blowing bubble gum, chocolate frogs, pumpkin pasties, cauldron cakes, licorice wands, and a number of other strange things Harry had never seen in his life. Not wanting to miss anything, he got some of everything, and paid the woman 11 silver sickles and 7 bronze knuts. Ron stared at Harry. Ron stared as Harry brought it all back into the compartment and tipped it on to an empty seat. "Hungry, are you?" "Starving," said Harry, taking a large bite out of a pumpkin pasty. Ron had taken out a lumpy package and unwrapped it. There were 4 sandwiches in there. He pulled one of them apart and said, "She always forgets I don't like corned beef." "Swap you for one of these," said Harry, holding up a pasty. "Go on. You don't want one of these. It's all dry," said Ron. "She hasn't got much time," he added quickly. "You know, with 5 of us." "Go on, have a pasty," said Harry, who had never had anything to share before, or indeed anyone to share it with. It was a nice feeling sitting there with Ron, eating their way through all Harry's pasties and cakes. The sandwiches lay forgotten. "What are these?" Harry asked Ron, holding up a pack of chocolate frogs. "They're not really frogs, are they?" He was starting to feel that nothing would surprise him. "No," said Ron. "But see what the card is. I'm missing Sorry, my name. Sorry here, guys. I'm missing Agrippa. I can't pronounce that name." "What?" "Oh, of course, you wouldn't know. Chocolate frogs have cards inside them, to collect. Famous witches and wizards. I've got 500, but I haven't got Abracika or Polysemy." Harry unwrapped his chocolate frog and picked up the card. It showed a man's face. He wore half-moon glasses, had a long crooked nose, and a flowing silver hair, beard, and moustache. Underneath the picture was the name Albus Dumbledore. "So this is Dumbledore," said Harry. "Don't tell me you've never heard of Dumbledore," said Ron. "Can I have a frog? I might get Agrippa. Thanks." Harry turned over his card and read, "Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts, considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times. Professor Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling." Harry turned the card back over and saw, to his astonishment, that Dumbledore's face had disappeared. "He's gone! We can't expect him to hang around all day," said Ron. "He'll be back." "No, I've got Morgana again, and I've got about 6 of her. Do you want it? You can start collecting." Ron's eyes strayed to the pile of chocolate frogs waiting to be unwrapped. "Help yourself," said Harry. "But in, the Muggle world, people just stay put in the photos." "Do they? What? They don't move at all?" Ron said, amazed. "Weird." Harry stared as Dumbledore slid back into the picture on his card and gave him a small smile. Ron was more interested in eating the frogs than looking at the famous witches and wizard cards, but Harry couldn't keep his eyes off them. Soon he had not only Dumbledore and Morgana, but Hengist of Woodcroft, Albic, Gronion, Cyrus, Palcadius, and Merlin. He finally tore his eyes away from the druidless Colunda, who was scratching her nose, to open a bag of Bertie Bott's every flavour beans. "You want to be careful with those," Ron warned Harry. "When they say every flavour, they mean every flavour. You get all the ordinary ones like chocolate, peppermint, and marmalade, but then you get spinach, liver, and tripe. George reckons he had a bogey flavoured one once." Ron picked up a green bean, looked at it carefully, and bit into a corner. "Blech! See? Sprouts." They had a good time eating the every flavoured beans. Harry got toast, coconut, baked beans, strawberry, curry, grass, coffee, sardine, and was even brave enough to nibble the end of a funny grey one Ron wouldn't touch, which turned out to be pepper. The countryside now flying past the windows was becoming wilder. The neat fields had gone. Now there were woods, twisting rivers, and dark green hills. There was a knock on the door of the compartment, and the round-faced boy Harry had passed on platform 9 3/4 came in. He looked tearful. "Sorry," he said, "but you haven't seen a toad at all?" When they shook their heads, he wailed, "I've lost him! He keeps getting away from me." "He'll turn up," said Harry. "Yes," said the boy miserably. "Well, if you see him." He left. "Don't know why he's so bothered," said Ron. "If I'd bought a toad, I'd lose it as quick as I could. Mind you, I bought Scabbers, so I can't talk." The rat was still snoozing on Ron's lap. "He might have died and you wouldn't even know the difference," said Ron in disgust. "I tried to turn him yellow yesterday to make him more interesting, but the spell didn't work. I'll show you. Look." He rummaged around in his trunk, and pulled out a very battered-looking wand. It was chipped in places, and something white was glinting at the end. Unicorn's hair nearly poking out. Anyway, he had just raised his wand when the compartment door slid open again. The toadless boy was back, but this time he had a girl with him. She was already wearing her new Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone seen a toad? Neville's lost one," she said. She had a bossy sort of voice, lots of bushy brown hair, and rather large front teeth. "We already told him we haven't seen it," said Ron, but the girl wasn't listening. She was looking at the wand in his hand. "Oh, you're doing magic? Let's see, then." She sat down. Ron looked taken aback. All right." He cleared his throat. "Sunshine, daisies, butter, mallow, turn this stupid fat wet yellow." He waved his wand, but nothing happened. Scabbers stayed grey and fast asleep. "Are you sure that's a real spell?" said the girl. "Well, it's not very good, is it? I tried a few simple ones, just for practice, but it's all worked for me. Nobody in my family's magic at all. It was ever such a surprise when I got my letter, but I was ever so pleased, of course. I mean, it's the very best school of witchcraft there is, I've heard. I've learned all our set of books off by heart, of course. I just hope it will be enough. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. Who are you?" She said all this very fast. Harry looked at Ron and was relieved to see by his stunned face that he hadn't learnt all the set books off by heart either. I'm Ron Weasley, Ron muttered. Harry Potter, said Harry. Are you really? Said Hermione. I know all about you, of course. I've got a few extra books for background reading. And you're in Modern Magical History and the Rise and Fall of the Dark Arts and Great Wizarding Events of the 20th Century. Am I? Said Harry, feeling dazed. Goodness, didn't you know? I would have found out everything I could if it was me, said Hermione. Do either of you know what house you'll be in? Oh, I've been asking around, and I hope I'm in Gryffindor. It sounds by far the best. I heard Dumbledore himself was one, but I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. Anyway, we'd better go and look for Neville's toad. You two had better change, you know. I suspect we'll be there soon. And then she left, taking the toadless boy with her. Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it, said Ron. He threw his wand back into the trunk. Stupid spell. George gave it to me. Bet he knew it was a dud. What house are your brothers in? Asked Harry. Give me a second, just move my mouse. There we go. Gryffindor, said Ron. Gloom seemed to be sitting on him again. Mum and Dad were in it too. Don't know what they'll say if I'm not. I don't suppose Ravenclaw would be too bad, but imagine they put me in Slytherin. That's the house vault Amy, you know who was in. Yeah, said Ron. He flopped back into his seat, looking depressed. You know, I think the ends of Scabbard's whiskers are a bit lighter, said Harry, trying to take Ron's mind off houses. So what do your oldest brothers do now they've left, anyway? Harry was wondering what a wizard did once he'd finished school. Charlie's in Romania studying dragons, and Bill's in Africa doing something for Gringotts, said Ron. Did you hear about Gringotts? It's been all over the Daily Prophet, but I don't suppose you get that with the muggles. Someone tried to rob a high-security vault. Harry stared. Really? What happened to them? Nothing. That's why it's such big news. They haven't been caught. My dad says it must have been a powerful dark wizard to get around Gringotts, but they didn't think they took anything. That's what's odd. Of course, everyone gets scared when something like this happens, in case you know who's behind it. Harry turned this news over in his mind. He was starting to get a prickle of fear every time you know who was mentioned. He supposed this was all part of entering the magical world, but it had been a lot more comfortable saying Voldemort without worrying. What's your Quidditch team? Ron asked. I don't know any, Harry confessed. What? Ron looked dumbfounded. Oh, you wait, it's the best game in the world. And he was off, explaining all about the 4 balls and the positions of the 7 players, describing famous games he's been to with his brothers, and the broomstick he would like to get if they had the money. And he was just taking Harry through the final points of the game when the compartment door slid open yet again. But it wasn't Neville, the toadless boy, or Hermione Granger this time. 3 boys entered, and Harry recognised the middle one at once. It was a pale boy from Madame Malkin's robe shop. He was looking at Harry with a lot more interest than he'd shown back in Diagon Alley. Is it true? He said. They're saying all down the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment. So it's you, is it? Yes, said Harry. He was looking at the other boys. Both of them were thickest and looked extremely mean. Standing either side of the pale boy and that boy, they looked like bodyguards. Oh, this is Crabbe and this is Goyle, said the pale boy, carelessly, noticing where Harry was looking. And my name's Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. One gave a slight cough, which might have been holding back a snigger. Draco Malfoy looked at him. Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. My father told me all about the Weasleys. They have red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford. He turned back to Harry. You'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. He held out his hand to shake Harry's, but Harry didn't take it. I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself, thanks, he said coolly. Draco Malfoy didn't go red, but a pink tinge appeared in his pale cheeks. I'd be careful if I were you, Potter, he said slowly. Unless you're a bit politer, you'll go the same way as your parents. They didn't know what was good for them either. You'll hang around with riffraff like the Weasleys and the Hagrid. It'll rub off on you. Both Harry and Ron stood up. Ron's face was as red as his hair. Say that again, he said. Oh, you're going to fight us, are you? Malfoy sneered. Unless you get out now, said Harry, more bravely than he felt, because Crabbe and Goyle were a lot bigger than him or Ron. But we don't feel like leaving, do we, boys? We've eaten all our food, and you still seem to have some. Goyle reached towards the chocolate frogs next to Ron. Ron leapt forward, but before he'd so much as touched Goyle, Goyle let out a horrible yell. Scabbers the rat was hanging off his finger. Sharp little teeth sunk deep into Goyle's knuckle. Crabbe and Malfoy backed away as Goyle swung Scabbers around and around, howling. And when Scabbers finally flew off and hit the window, all three of them disappeared at once. Perhaps they thought there were more rats lurking among the sweets, or perhaps they heard footsteps, because a second later Hermione Granger had come in. What has been going on? She said, looking at the sweets all over the floor, and Ron picking up Scabbers by his tail. I think he's been knocked out, Ron said to Harry. He looked closer at Scabbers. No, I don't believe it. He's gone back to sleep. And so he had. You've met Malfoy before? Harry explained about their meeting in Diagon Alley. I've heard of his family, said Ron darkly. They were some of the first to come back to our side after you-know-who disappeared. Said they'd been bewitched. My dad doesn't believe it. He says Malfoy's father didn't need an excuse to go over to the dark side. He turned to Hermione. Can we help you with something? You better hurry up and put on your robes. I've just been up at the front to ask the driver and he says we're nearly there. You haven't been fighting, have you? You'll be in trouble before you even get there. Scabbers has been fighting, not us, said Ron, scowling at her. Would you mind leaving us while we change? All right. I only came in here because people outside are behaving like childishly, racing up and down the corridors, said Hermione in a sniffy voice. And you've got dirt on your nose, by the way. Did you know? Ron glared at her as she left. Harry peered out of the window. It was getting dark. He could see mountains and forest under a deep purple sky. The train did seem to be slowing down. He and Ron took off the jackets and pulled on their long black robes. Ron's were a bit short for him. You could see his trainers beneath them. A voice echoed through the train. We'll be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes' time. Please leave your luggage on the train. It will be taken to the school separately. Harry's stomach lurched with nerves, and Ron, he saw, looked pale under his freckles. They crammed their pockets with the last of the sweets and joined the crowd thronging the corridor. The train slowed right down and finally stopped. People pushed away towards the door and out onto a tiny, dark platform. Harry shivered in the cold night's air. Then a lamp came bobbling over the heads of the students, and Harry heard a familiar voice. There she is! There she is over here! All right there, Harry! Hagrid's big, hairy face beamed over the sea of heads. Go on, follow me. Any more Firstians? Mind your step now. Firstians, follow me. Slipping and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down what seemed to be a steep, narrow path. It was so dark either side of them that Harry thought there must be thick trees there. Nobody spoke much. Neville, the boy who kept losing his toad, sniffled once or twice. You'll get your first ride of Hogwarts in a sec, Hagrid called over his shoulder. Just round the bend, yep. Then there was a loud ooh. The narrow path had opened suddenly onto the edge of a great black lake. Perched atop a high mountain on the other side, its windows sparkling in the starry sky, was a vast castle with many turrets and towers. No more to fall into a boat, Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little boats. sitting in the water by the shore. Harry and Ron were followed into their boat by Neville and Hermione. "Everyone in!" shouted Hagrid, who had a boat to himself. "Right then, forward!" And the fleet of little boats moved off all at once, gliding across the lake, which was as smooth as glass. Everyone was silent, staring up at the great castle overhead. Towered over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff on which it stood. "Heads down!" yelled Hagrid as the first boats reached the cliff. They all bent their heads, and the little boats carried them through a curtain of ivy which had a wide opening in the cliff face. They were carried along a dark tunnel which seemed to be taking them right underneath the castle until they reached a kind of underground harbour, where they clambered out onto the rocks and pebbles. "Oi, you there! There's your toad," said Hagrid, who was chucking the boats as people clambered out of them. "Trevor!" cried Neville blissfully, holding out his hands. Then they clambered up a passageway in the rock after Hagrid's lamp, coming out at last to a smooth, damp grass right in the shadow of the castle. They walked up a flight of stone steps and crowded round a huge oak front door. "Anyone here? You there, still got your toad?" Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door. Right, that's the end of chapter 6. Right, let me just check how long chapter 7 is. Well, it should be around 20 pages, I believe. Screw it, we will do chapter 7 as well. If you're liking this, guys, make sure to leave a like and a follow and subscribe. Hit the notification icon as well. And yeah, without further ado, let's continue. What's the time? It's 20 past 10 at the moment currently, guys. Let's continue then. Right. Chapter 7. The Sorting Hat. The door swung open at once. A tall, black-haired witch in emerald green robe stood there. She had a very stern face, and Harry's first thought was that this was not someone to cross. "The first year's Professor McGonagall," said Hagrid. Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here." She pulled the door wide. The entrance hall was so big you could have fitted the whole of Dursley's house in it. The stone walls were lit with flaming torches like the ones at Gringotts. The ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marble staircase facing them led to the upper floors. They followed Professor McGonagall across the flagged stone floor. Harry could hear the drone of hundreds of voices from a doorway to the right. The rest of the school must already be here, but Professor McGonagall showed the first years into a small empty chamber off the hall. They crowded in, standing rather closer together than they would usually have done, peering about nervously. "Welcome to Hogwarts," said Professor McGonagall. "The staff term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony, because while you are here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. You'll have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend free time in your house common room. The 4 houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has its own noble history, and each has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule breaking will lose house points. At the end of the year, the house with most points is awarded the House Cup, a great honour. I hope each of you will be a credit to whichever house becomes yours. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you are waiting." Her eyes lingered for a moment on Neville's cloak, which was fastened under his left ear, and on Ron's smudged nose. Harry nervously tried to flatten his hair. I shall return when we are ready for you, said Professor McGonagall. Please wait quietly. She left the chamber. Harry swallowed. How exactly do they sort us into houses? He asked Ron. Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking. Harry's heart gave a horrible jolt. A test? He wanted the whole school, but he didn't know any magic yet. What on earth would he have to do? He hadn't expected something like this the moment they arrived. He looked around anxiously and saw that everyone else looked terrified too. No one was talking much except Hermione Granger, who was whispering very fast about all the spells she learnt and wondering which ones you'll need. Harry tried hard not to listen to her. He had never been more nervous. Never. Not even when he'd been take a school report home to the Dursleys, saying that he was somehow turned his teacher's wig blue. He kept his eyes fixed on the door. Any second now, Professor McGonagall would come back and lead them to his doom. Then something happened which made him jump about a foot in the air. Several people behind him screamed, "What the?" He gasped. So did the people around him. About 20 ghosts had just streamed through the back wall, pearly white and slightly transparent. They glided across the room, talking to each other and hardly glancing at the first years. They seemed to be arguing. What looked like a fat little monk was saying, "Forgive and forget. I say, we ought to give him a second chance. My dear Friar, we haven't given Pease all the chances he deserves. He gives us all a bad name, and you know he's not really a ghost. I say, what are you all doing here?" A ghost wearing a ruff and ties had suddenly noticed the first years. Nobody answered. "New students," said the fat friar, smiling around at them. "About to be sorted, I suppose?" Pardon me. A few people nodded mutely. "Hope to see you in Hufflepuff," said the friar. "My old house, you know." "Move along now," said a sharp voice. "Sorting ceremony's about to start." Professor McGonagall had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away through the opposite wall. "Now, form a line," Professor McGonagall told the first years, "and follow me." Feeling oddly as though his legs had turned to lead, Harry got into line behind a boy with sandy hair, with Ron behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the great hall. Harry had never even imagined such a strange and splendid place. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles, which were floating in mid-air over 4 long tables, which the rest of the students were sitting. These tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first years up here, so they came to a halt in a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces staring at them looked like pale lanterns in the flickering candlelight. Dotted here and there among the students, the ghosts shone misty silver. Mainly to avoid all the staring eyes, Harry looked upwards and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched, you know, to look like the night sky outside. I read it in Hogwarts A History." It was hard to believe there was a ceiling there at all, and that the great hall didn't simply open onto the heavens. Oh, sorry, guys. Yeah. Harry quickly looked down at Professor McGonagall, Harry quickly looked down again as Professor McGonagall silently placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard's hat. This hat was patched and frayed and extremely dirty. Aunt Petunia wouldn't have let it in the house. Maybe they've had to try and get a rabbit out of it, Harry thought wildly. That seemed to the sort of thing. Noticing that everyone in the hall was now staring at the hat, he stared at it too. For a few seconds there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and then the hat began to sing. Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your borders black, your top hat slick and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see. So try me on, tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave of heart. The daring, nerve, and chivalry set Gryffindor apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuff are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you are ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find your kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin, you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, though I have none, for I am a thinking cap. Sorry about my singing, I know it was awful. Sorry, hang on. I realised I didn't even have this on. Hey! More light, I can actually see what I'm reading now. The hall burst into applause as the hat finished its song. It bowed each of the 4 tables and then became quite still again. So, we've just got to try the hat on, Ron whispered to Harry. Oh, kill Fred! You're going about wrestling a troll! Harry smiled weakly. Yes, trying on the hat was a lot better than having to do a spell, but he did wish they could have tried it on without everyone watching. That hat seemed to be asking rather a lot. Harry didn't feel brave or quick-witted or anything of it at that moment. If only the hat had mentioned a house for people who felt a bit queasy, that would have been the one for him. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward, holding a long roll of parchment. When I call your name, you will put on the hat, sit on the stool to be sorted, she said. Abbott, Hannah. A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of line, put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause. Hufflepuff! Shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down at the Hufflepuff table. Harry saw the ghost of the fat friar waving merrily at her. Boons, Susan, Hufflepuff! Shouted the hat again, and Susan scuttered off to sit next to Hannah. Boot, Terry, Ravenclaw! The table second from the left clapped this time. Several Ravenclaws stood up to shake hands with Terry as he joined them. Brooklehurst, Mandy? Went to Ravenclaw too, but Brown Lavender became the first new Gryffindor, and the table on the far left exploded with cheers. Harry could see Ron's twin brother catcalling. Bulstrode Miglant then became a Slytherin. Perhaps it was Harry's imagination. After all, he heard about the Slytherin, but he thought they looked like an unpleasant lot. He was starting to feel definitely sick now. He remembered being picked for teams during sports lessons at his old school. He had always been last to be chosen, not because he was no good, but because no one wanted Dudley to think they liked him. Finch, Fletchley, Justin, Hufflepuff! Sometimes Harry noticed the hat shouted out the house at once, but others it took a little while to decide. Finnegan Seamus, the sandy-haired boy next to Harry in the line, sat on the stool for almost a whole minute before the hat declared him a Gryffindor. Granger, Hermione? Hermione almost ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head. Gryffindor! Shouted the hat. Ron groaned. A horrible thought shocked Harry, as horrible thoughts always do when you're very nervous. What if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he just sat there with the hat over his eyes for ages until Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said there had obviously been a mistake, and he'd better go back on the train. Whenever Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toad, was called, he fell over on his way to the stall. That took a long time to decide with Neville. When it finally shouted, "Gryffindor!" Neville ran off, still wearing it, and had to jog back amid gales of laughter to give it to McGonagall. Malfoy swaggered forward when his name was called, and had got his wish at once. The hat had barely touched his head when it screamed, "Slytherin!" Malfoy went to join his friends Crabbe and Goyle, looking pleased with himself. There weren't many people left now. Moon, Nort, Paterson, then a pair of twin girls, Patil and Patil, then Perks, Sally, Anne, and then at last Potter, Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out, like little hissing fires all over the hall. "Bad mind, Ivor. There's talent. Oh my goodness, yes. And a nice first to prove yourself. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you?" Harry gripped the edges of his stool and thought, "Not Slytherin, not Slytherin, not Slytherin, eh?" said the small voice. "Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head. A Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. No? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor!" Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the whole hall. He took off the